Hi friends, in this session, let's do a hands-on lab session to run few important AWS S3 commands using CLI. Below are the frequently performed actions on S3 but are not limited to. For a complete list of commands, you can always use AWS help or AWS documentation for S3 CLI. Well, these are list objects in a bucket, including multiple levels of directory structures. And then we will see how to upload and download single or multiple files. And we will also see how we can move files or folders within an S3 bucket. And finally, we will see how we can sync data between two different buckets within S3. Alright, let's get started. Let's first do list objects within a bucket. So AWS and S3, that's the service name. And then ls. ls is a command to list objects. If you're familiar with Linux operating system, ls is a well-known command. Well, if you're not familiar with Linux, well, ls is a command used to list objects within a given directory. So S3 URL for CLI starts with s3:// and then we need to give the bucket name, Whizlabs and don't worry, this is not any website URL. This is an S3 bucket named. I named it with .com as I was using this as a static website hosting bucket. Well, it really doesn't matter which bucket you use to list, you just have to provide the bucket name in here, that is it. And you can suffix with the S3 prefix from which you want to list the objects if you want to look at the objects within a specific directory. For now, let's do it at bucket level. So let's run this command. Well, you can see all the folders and files directly under the given path, that is the bucket. Let's say if you want to list objects under a folder, you can simply add that S3 prefix of this particular folder to this path. So let's add CSS in here. Let's also see the fonts. Okay, but if you have tens or hundreds or even thousands of such folders to look at, that's next to impossible by doing this way, isn't it? So recursive option comes to rescue here. Let's run the same command at the bucket level but with recursive option. There you go. You can see all the files within the given path with multiple levels deep. And let's say you want to know how many objects exist under this path and what's the total size. You can add another option called as summarize. And let's run it. There you go. You can see the object count and the size. This gives information about all the objects within since we are using recursive. If you want the details only about the immediate children, just remove the recursive option. The numbers in here are in bytes. Well, these are readable now as they are smaller. But if you have GBs or TBs of data, it's slightly difficult to read the number and convert them, isn't it? So let's add this option, -- human readable. And let's run. And here you can see the information in the readable format, which could be KBs or MBs or GBs or TBs. Number of objects here are lesser, so we can see the data quickly. So what if you have tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands or even millions of objects within a bucket? The ls recursive command here does not limit the result. So it takes all the time in the world if you're listing millions of objects and you would never be able to see and read the information from the command prompt. Let's take a look at that example as well. I have a bucket for CloudTrail logs. Let's take a look at the metrics on how many files we have. Well, close to 7,000. Perfect example. Let's try to list objects from here. AWS S3 ls and then the bucket name, recursive and summarize. Okay, you can see the list is going on and on and on. Alright, you see the number of files in here, but no way to see if it displayed all of them. So let's write the same command output to a file, s3 ls output.txt, and let's run it. Alright, let's open the file and take a look. You can see it had listed all 7,653 files. So imagine how much time it can take and how unreadable it would be if you list a bucket having hundreds of thousands or even millions of objects? Well, with ls command, we don't have any option to limit the number of results. Well, if you're thinking about how to do that, AWS CLI also comes with another detailed API for S3 called S3 API, which will have all the detailed actions that are typically provided by S3 API for SDKs or REST services. The previous service named S3 only comes with higher level frequently used commands which are not available directly in S3 API service. But if you want more detailed actions such as updating bucket policy or adding ACL to the bucket, enable versioning on an object, etc., use S3 API instead. So in this use case, let's use the following command from S3 API: list objects v2, and then the bucket parameter and the bucket name in here, and the max items to limit the results, and let's put the value as 10 for now, and let's run the command. There you go, you only see fewer objects in here. If you want to list the next set of objects, you can use this next token in here, copy this and run the same command by adding an option which is starting token, and then give the value in here, and let's run this command and you get the next 10 objects. Well, you can keep using this next token and go on and on until you reach the end, or if you feel that's the amount of objects you need. Well, this is in JSON format, so let's display only the key and size using the query option. Then the value as contents, then key equals to key, and then size equals size, and let's run this. Oops, it should be colon, not equals. So let's change it to colon and run the command again. And you can see the key and size only. Still, this is in JSON format. Let's try to print this in text format by adding output and the value as text. And there you go. Okay, we spent good amount of time on list objects. It's worth the time as it is most frequently used command if you're working frequently with S3. Let's move on to the next command. Let's see how we can upload files to S3. We will use S3 CP command. We can also use S3 API put object, but for now we will use S3. Again, CP is a widely used Linux command to copy files from source to destination. I have a file in current directory in here, so let's try to upload this. AWS S3 CP and the source file, and the destination I will use a different bucket in here, and let's put it under upload directory folder. Let's run the command. Alright, upload has been complete. Let's do an ls on the same path and you can see the file. Let's also check on S3 console. Let's refresh here and you can see the file in here as well. Now let's try to download the same file, but what should be the command for download? It's CP again, but we will just swap the source and destination. AWS S3 CP, now here the bucket path till the file name to be downloaded, and then the local path where the file should be downloaded. Alright, the file has been downloaded. Let's list the current directory. Well, it's under S3 downloads, so let's cd into it and let's list again, and there is a file. Now let's take a look at how to upload multiple files or even an entire hierarchy of folder structure. Well, I have these 4 files under this folder, so let's try to upload all of them at once. Let's go back to the command prompt and AWS S3 CP and the source folder to upload and the destination S3 folder path, and let's add recursive option in here and let's run it, and all the files have been uploaded. Well, you can use the same command to upload folders with multi-level hierarchy as well. Let's go back to the console and see if the files are reflecting. Let's refresh and there they are. Let's also do an ls in here and we can see all the files we uploaded so far. Similarly, you can also download multiple files or entire folder hierarchy using recursive. So let's run this command and the files are downloaded. Let's check in local directory and there they are. Alright, next command is move. It's again similar to move command in Linux. It's AWS S3 MV, and then the source file to move, which is under upload directory, and the destination path with bucket name and the move directory. And let's run this. Okay, the file has been moved. Let's go back and check in the console, refresh, and let's go into the move directory, and there is the file. And just like ls and cp commands, you can use recursive option for move as well, which will move entire directory. Let's run the same command but with recursive option. Let's remove the file name from here as we want to move all the objects within this folder, and let's add recursive option. Let's run it. All the files have been moved. Let's go back to the console and refresh, and you can see all the files are now moved to this directory. And next, let's quickly look at sync command. For that, let's create a new bucket. Let's name it as Whiz CLI demo bucket sync. Let's go back to the command prompt and run this command. AWS S3 sync and the source S3 path, which is our Whiz CLI demo bucket to which we uploaded some files before, and the destination would be our new bucket. And let's run this command. All the objects are now copied over to the new bucket. Well, you might be wondering, you can also achieve this using cp command with both source and destination as two different bucket paths. But the difference between sync and cp is that sync recursively copies new and updated files from the source directory to the destination, whereas cp just blindly copies all the objects and overwrite existing objects. Well, if you are versioning enabled, it adds the new version to the object, even if there are no changes to that particular object. And remember, sync only creates folders in the destination if they contain one or more files. Let's go back to the console and check, and to the move directory, and there are 5 files has been created under it. You might be wondering why there is only one folder, but we have seen multiple folders in source. Well, that's because, as I said, sync only creates folders in the destination if they contain one or more files under it. Let's go to the source bucket to validate this statement, and you can see none of the folders here have any files except for the move directory. Let's quickly add a file under this upload directory to witness sync only copies the new files or updated ones. Alright, let's go back to the command prompt and run the sync command again. Well, you can only see one file has been copied. If you go back to the console and in the destination bucket, there is now a new directory and a new file under it. Alright, that is it, folks. Just remember that AWS CLI for S3 has 2 services. One is S3, a higher level service which comes with frequently used commands such as ls, cp, move, sync, etc. And another one is S3 API, a detailed service for all other API actions on S3 such as bucket policy, bucket versioning, etc. I recommend you start practicing CLI for S3. It is very simple and nothing complex, and it's easy to understand.
Learn with Whizlabs. Success certified.